I'd like to thank a few people. Professor Stuart Berhoff, my chief supervisor, for his support and patience, just in case he's listening. And Graham McElwain, who's been involved in this project for many years. And quite a lot of his data I'm actually using. And he certainly helped me put this talk together. To put you in the right part of the world, Ireland, top right of the little map. Sorry, England isn't in there. It's a bit further away since the Irish sea border went in. And I couldn't squeeze it on. The center of Northern Ireland, there's a very large lake called Lough Neagh, and a small satellite loch to the north, Lough Beg. And this talk is about a road development that goes through an important swan area and the mitigation and sensitivities of how the planning permission was given, what they had to do to get the road through, and how the actual mitigation worked, the efficacy, and the results of the project. The aerial photograph in the little white surrounded box in the top left shows you the size of Lough Neagh. Lough Beg is tiny in comparison in the top left corner, so it is a big site. It is collectively the Lough Neagh and Lough Beg SPA, European designated site for multiple species, multiple habitats, and Hooper swans, Icelandic Hooper swans, are featured species. And you can see the road marked in the heading between Toome and Mossbawn, and that connects Belfast to Londonderry, a previous bottleneck to two major cities in Northern Ireland. This is just a context of the flyway population. Same figures as Cian had yesterday, but it shows you where the third most important Hooper site in the British Isles and Ireland is, i.e. the Lough Neagh and Lough Beg complex or lochs. And you can see Toome figures, 300 in the international census back in 2000. And they have been increasing steadily to the last one in 2020. On a percentage basis for Northern Ireland, again, it has been increasing steadily since the turn of the noughties, turn of the millennium. As a flyaway, it is pretty much holding its own compared to the Northern Ireland total, which has been fairly stable over the last 20 years, and which has been as a share of the flyway population dropping. But there's still good numbers of birds coming to Ireland, especially down south in the Republic. That has also been increasing steadily. This road development was contentious. It originally was proposed back in 2004, 2005, and it went to a public inquiry. There was one environmentalist, I say objectors in plural. There was one quite a powerful conservationist, ornithologist, who's been putting everybody through their paces for the last 15 years. He took a private action against the Department for Infrastructure, my funders, took them to the High Court, and also took them to the Supreme Court. And if it hadn't been for Brexit, it would have gone to the European Parliament. I think it probably cost the taxpayer several £1 million, probably the price of putting the road through this section. But it is a warning to developments in the future that they have to get it right. And it certainly puts the emphasis on conservation and protecting species. There's a few things you may not understand in this cartoon in the Irish News. The area is quite famous for on a cultural sort of heritage with Seamus Heaney, as a famous Irish poet, as well as a very important wetland for ducks and waders. Icelandic Hooper swans, they arrive in October, similar to everywhere else in the UK and Ireland. They first come into Lough Beg, and they are on aquatics for a few weeks. There's not much there. They eventually run out, and/or the levels rise and they get pushed off. And they then come on to this agricultural landscape. It's mostly improved pasture, a little bit of oats, a little bit of barley stubble that they come into. And eventually by Christmas time, they're pretty much on pasture. Numbers increase steadily up into January, February, as birds come down from Loch Foyle, from the very north coast of Ireland. So this is the most important overwintering site in Ireland. You can see by the background, the roads, villages, industrial business units. There's lots going on. So we have swans that are dependent on a landscape, agricultural landscape. That is subject to quite a bit of urbanization encroachment, which will continue. Get the road through planning and mitigation was set up. Construction window was mid-March to October. It's a 2 or 3 year construction program. They had to only operate when the swans were not around. But I will point out, you'll see a few white things up there. This is in June. This is the Loch Beg breeding population that has been building over the last 20 years. I think we have 5 or 6 breeding pairs, maybe 20 or so non-breeders that we're keeping an eye on with regard to protection and what they might need in the future. But the levels are very low at this time of year, and the swans are more than happy to stay out there. There are aspects of mitigation, road design detail with regard to minimizing the road footprint. I think it only went across maybe 3 or 4 hectares of pasture. Hooper Swan working group was set up. Eileen was very much part of the early days, and a lot of the planning and the mitigation plan for the swans was probably Eileen. Team Hooper Swan management scheme is what I'm talking about today. Field amalgamation, yeah, so Hooper Swans like big fields. There's a few hedges taken out. Graham was in charge of all the monitoring and reporting, and I was brought in to do the academic study on ecology and an experiment of can you teach old dogs new tricks? The Hooper Swan management scheme, basically keeping stock off the fields while the Hooper Swans are around. So no sheep, which are the close croppers, from 1st of October, the cattle from the 1st of November, and minimizing agricultural activity during the Hooper Swan months. No slurry application until the end of January, and then only half their land in any 4-week period. No fertilizer application, spraying, hedge cutting, etc. And hopefully leave 5 to 10 centimeters forward. The basic payments for the farmers, £75 per hectare for anything up to 100 swan days per hectare. But they got a premium if that went over that on a basis of, there was a pot of maybe £26,000 to £27,000. So depending on how many swans actually came into the area that winter, it would be split up amongst all the fields that had excessive numbers of swans. You also got financial support to lime and reseed, but as you'll see, we had to be careful which fields we actually applied that to. Picture of an Irish farmer. We don't all look like that. Just to prove it. I wear glasses. Land holdings, these are all different farms. Average size of farm was about 20 hectares. The study area was north of the road. There are swans that come into the southern section, but they are mostly Loch Ness swans in small numbers. You can see a straight line of the old road running along here. Swans, because of a power line, runs quite a high one, don't tend to cross it. So most of the swans just stay north of the road. This is the scheme area as such, showing the farmers that came into the scheme in, I think, green, and the ones that stayed out in grey. There was an earlier road scheme in here back in 2002, 2003, and that certainly annoyed this farmer. And this farm here, the farmer lived just there, so he was pretty annoyed by this new scheme. So they wouldn't come in. And I had some pleasant, unpleasant meetings with this fellow who came out chasing me on various occasions. So when I started this, working at night in these fields, I was looking for a flak jacket just in case. These are raw figures. This is sward height on the right. This is part of a paired field experiment, sort of binary experiment with swans that are in one field, the randomly selected field that didn't have swans, and trying to tease out the difference why swans were selecting some fields and not others. This is the raw data, but at least you can see the sward heights that they were coming into. Slight differences between years. That's fields that they were using on the right and fields that they weren't using on the left. Hardly any difference between the two here. Some difference in the first year, quite a difference between the 2 years. And that is all based on autumn weather and whether cattle get taken off early, whether they get the silage cut in time, and what the swans are presented with once they arrive. The graph on the other side is just the raw figures of the flock sizes that were in the fields in the experiment, and it just shows that the bigger flocks are on the smaller scale of sward heights. But that is much a factor of depletion through time as anything else. They were raw figures when they get put into the proper model, minimum adequate model, logistic regression. You can see, just to tease out a few things, certainly with regard to surface water in the fields, the second year was a much drier winter, and swans were selecting fields based on the amount of surface water they had. You'll see sward height was positive in the log odds, so definitely selecting fields based on sward height. Grass cover as opposed to bare ground, very obvious. Herbs, it's fairly neutral. They were eating certain herbs, but most of the fields didn't have that much. You'll see coarse is a negative feature, and grass dieback is a negative feature. And medium was what they were looking for. So, excuse me, I just want to get a drink. That's better. Yeah, we all know that sward height. Herbivores don't like big swards because of the amount of fiber and reduced levels of soluble carbohydrates. So, with regard to bite size, yeah, the coarse is obviously correlated with sward height. With regard to Graham's data, these are based on weekly surveys over 4 or 5 years. The left-hand side, yes, you're going to get more swans in bigger fields. So you can see the field IDs run up the left-hand side, the hectares of each field, and this is the cumulative flock size over just over 3 years, just to give you an example. But there are gaps. There are fields that they just don't come into regardless of the size, and there's the odd field that is quite small that they have used for various reasons. With regard to the different types of crop, I guess it's mostly pasture. A little bit of oats, but when you look at the difference between Italian rye crops, grass types, which is a single seed grass, and the standard mixed ward, my definition of a mixed ward is basically perennial rye. That's probably quite old and has various native species coming into it, Timothy and the likes. But Italian rye is quite separate, it's quite different. The reason why there's gaps in some of these fields is, amongst other things, but mainly due to infrastructural disturbance. These are a couple of graphs showing building exposure, root exposure, whether it's road or river, and overhead electric lines. And there's an index based on a reciprocal between the distances between these features and the centers of the fields. To model them, I use PCA to try and reduce the dimensions to one that I could use in models sufficiently that looked after 56% of the variation. But you can see the effect, the sort of compound effect on swans using certain fields, regardless of what crops are in them. Winter sheep grazing. When sheep were taken off in 2018-19, so we had 2 or 3 years of sheep being on, and then 2 or 3 years of sheep being off. The graph on the left shows the effects on one of the main farms where swans and sheep were using over those years. There's quite a huge difference in swan days, annual swan days, between sheep grazed during the winter at around 1,000 swan days to a mean of just 3,600 swan days. So it's a massive change when you take sheep off. Grass crops and reseeds. The differences between the Italian rye and the old mixed swards perennial rye. Substantial difference, both in old swards and whenever you get the reseeds. There wasn't that many fields in the early days that were in Italian, about 4 hectares. But by the time the PhD finished, the fieldwork finished, it was up to 9 hectares, and it was bringing in 35% of the swans. Look at the difference between some different cultivars. This is a quick experiment we did on using this Italian rye and using two different cultivars, a diploid and a tetraploid. It's a 3x3 block design, a 2x3 block design. And there's a hell of a difference between the tetraploid and the diploid. This is on fecal droppings accumulated over the winter. Both cultivars have the same biomass when we started, but by the end, all the droppings, about half of them were in the tetraploid zones. Putting it all together, it allows us to put a model together whereby we can predict, depending on whether they're grazed, what sort of crop they have, and the influence of certain infrastructure on fields. And that will hopefully guide any future programs, should they need tweaks in the future at a more efficient cost benefit. One thing that didn't go into the model was soil chemistry. It was a bit of an afterthought. We had some soil analysis that we flew into the models. And you can see potash, which is as a guide to residual soil fertility. This is in February time, and pH with regard to swan days and keeping swans in the fields were highly correlated. They may be confounded, but the correlation between the two is only about 0.4. So I will skip this. This is the manuring and the effects of manuring. You can see all the swans are in the little patch that was missed. And it only happened in one of the years, so I didn't have much to experiment with. This has become corrupted. It was showing line collisions, and there were maybe 20 or 30 line collisions over the 3 years between mute and hooper swans. So we had to be very careful what enhancements we were doing in fields. If you can imagine sticking a field of Italian rye close to some of these lines, you're just looking for trouble. Outcomes graph on the left shows a marked increase in numbers using a GAM model between 2018 and 2020, which is the impact of this scheme up and running. The road opened in 2020. The scheme started in 2018. Predicted models, you can see the change in numbers 3 years before and 3 years after. So it has been successful so far. What's down the line, we don't know. This is a flooding event in 2015. The water level control, keeping the Loch Lane levels down, all goes through the Lower Ban into Loch Beg. If climate change gets a hook and we do get wetter winters, it won't be the road that is causing problems for the swans. Just to summarize, we managed to pretty much double the swan days in 2019, 2020 from 2015. The Northern Irish 2020 census total was up from 10.5% to 14.3%. The increase in Italian ryegrass from 49.2% supports 35% of the total swan use now. The number of fields used has actually halved over the last 4 or 5 years. And that has reduced mortality as less swans are having to cross some of those dodgy lines. Models predict 23%, more or less 30% decrease in swans if the scheme is pulled. So at the moment, we're trying to get another funder to take over from the transport. Many thanks.